Wetlands are important for birds that make spectacular migrations to Australia each spring to escape the freezing winters of China and Russia. After resting and feeding in our wetlands, they then return to their northern breeding grounds. If the wetlands at either end of their long journeys, or those used as stopover points along the way, are destroyed or degraded, these birds have nowhere else to go, and all will eventually die. On the New South Wales coast, 2 Ramsar sites are listed for their importance to international migratory wading birds. On the edge of the industrial city of Newcastle lies Kooragang Nature Reserve. In the estuary of the Hunter River, this 2,000-hectare site, listed in 1984, is the most important site for migratory wading birds in New South Wales.
We're trying to work out what are the best management options in terms of the nature reserve and managing the site for migratory wading birds. Well, the other interesting thing about this particular site is what we're doing is actually rehabilitating part of the island, which has been had grazing on it for a long time. It's had rubbish dumped on it, and a lot of the creeks have been blocked up. Now, this is an all of government and other institutions are involved in opening up some of those creeks and rehabilitating the sites, reintroducing the tidal flow so that at last we maybe have some wetlands that perhaps have food resources for these migratory wading birds.
The other site is Tara Point Nature Reserve on the southern shores of Botany Bay, the industrial heart of Sydney. Tara Point is one of the few remaining natural areas of mangrove, salt marsh and beach complex in Sydney region.
Tara Point is right in the middle of Sydney. It has all the impacts that a big city would have. So it's in Botany Bay, and Botany Bay has been changed enormously over the years as we have made it a very big shipping port. We have an international terminal there. We've increased the number of runways by establishing a 3rd runway there. All of these impacts have changed the way the hydrodynamics of the bay operates. So there's a lot more waves, bigger waves. So they're impacting on Tara Point, and they tend to wash away parts of the island. And so I think it's important for us to be able to understand and get the message across to the public of the sorts of impacts that humans can have on these areas.
In northwestern New South Wales, where the Macquarie River branches into numerous channels or braided streams, is the enormous Macquarie Marshes. The entire wetland complex covers 130,000 hectares, of which 18,000 hectares are protected as a nature reserve. The Macquarie Marshes, recognised as some of the most important wetlands for birds in New South Wales, was listed as a Ramsar site in 1986.
The National Parks has its, as I said, 14% of the marshes, and it actively manages those problems within there. It has a fire management program. It will have a pest management programs to ensure that populations of feral animals don't get too high. But perhaps much more important than that, it's looking very carefully at how we look at the other issues, which are the ones that ensure that water gets through to the marshes, and so it's looking at the long-term sustainability of these river systems.
Protection of our biodiversity is important because of its economic functions and values. Collectively, the federal and state governments, together with the community, are working towards the conservation and wise and sustainable use and management of wetlands in New South Wales.
Wetland conservation in the future is never going to work unless we get the whole of the community and private companies involved, because every conservation organisation, including the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, is only going to have a certain amount of land that it can manage, wetlands that it can manage, or sort of policy input. We really need to educate the community, and we need people to understand A, the values of the wetlands, and then B, the sort of processes they need to implement before we can get real conservation.
Management aims not only to allow these areas to survive, but to continue to evolve and provide homes for their dependent wildlife and economic benefits to the community. It will also allow our children and theirs to continue to draw the same pleasures and enjoyment we do from these fragile but extraordinarily beautiful and productive places.